Hey there, I'm Adrienne, your go-to guide on this empowering journey to self-love and authenticity. I've transformed my own struggles into strengths, and now I help others navigate their path to their inner knowing and create personal fulfillment. On this show, we're not shying away from tough conversations. We're diving headfirst into topics like self-worth, overcoming limiting beliefs, challenging societal norms, and creating a life that's not just successful, but truly fulfilling. We're all about blending heartfelt, soul-searching chats with practical, actionable strategies. Think of this podcast as your trusty compass on the path to your most authentic life, mixed with a cozy fireside chat with a dear friend. Ready to uncover your true self and lead a life that's in sync with your deepest desires? You're in the right place, friend. Welcome to the Live Your Truth, Love Your Life podcast. Hey there. Welcome back to another episode of Live Your Truth, Love Your Life. Today we're going to explore the question, what is your giving taking from you? I want you to consider, have you ever felt stretched thin, like you're pouring from an almost empty cup? Side note, I hate that expression, pouring from a cup, pouring from an empty cup, but it serves for the visual that I need. So we'll go with it. But anyways, I know this was true of me for a long time, and I know it's true for others, that we often believe that giving endlessly is a key to fulfillment. But what if our constant giving is leaving us drained? You can't pour from an empty cup. We're going to explore this today, and I invite you to consider the balance between giving and self-care and ensuring that your generosity doesn't come at your own expense. Grab a cup of tea, settle in. We're going to get into it. We live in a world that often celebrates selflessness. The more you give, the more you're praised. The narrative has been the more you sacrifice, the nobler you are. But is there such a thing as giving too much? Can our generosity sometimes be at our own expense? At this point in my life, I would say yes. We can give too much, and generosity can deplete us sometimes. Picture this: Sicily, 1926. Golden Girls reference. Anybody? Just me. Side note, I love that show, and I still watch reruns of it. But anyways, the point. Picture this. So you have a jug of water, and with every act of giving, you pour some out. Over time, if you don't refill the jug, you're going to run dry. And that's the essence of overextension. You give more than you have or more than you can replenish. I know the fatigue that comes from this, and I'm sure most of you do too. Maybe it's late nights, helping a friend when you should be sleeping. You're already down a couple days of solid rest, and you know tonight you need that good night's sleep because you've got your work presentation or you've got something planned with your kids or whatever it might be, but you know you need that night's rest. But your friend needs your help, so sleep is sacrificed. Maybe there's countless favors. Maybe they're from one person. Maybe they're from a few. Maybe you're the go-to person in your circle of friends or your family that helps out with everything. As the requests come in, you stretch yourself again and again and again, so thin because maybe you think that's what good people do. That's what a good friend does. That's what a good girlfriend does. That's what a good mom does. That's what a good employee does. It almost becomes an obligation. But here's a little bit of truth. I've experienced burnout, and the expression, I hate, you can't pour from an empty cup, is true. And it's not selfish to prioritize yourself, it's essential. Self-care, it's not spa days or vacations, though I love both. It's setting boundaries. It's saying no when it's necessary. It's taking time to take care of yourself, to nurture yourself. Overextending yourself, it probably comes from a place of love, but over time, it can lead to resentment, exhaustion, and ironically, a diminishing capacity to give. So, how do we find that balance? First off, recognize your limits, right? Know what you can and can't do. Understand that it's okay to say no. It's okay to prioritize your well being, and it's okay to take breaks. Your genuine acts of kindness and giving will shine much brighter when they come from a place of abundance, not depletion, from an energy of generosity rather than obligation. I want to take a second to reflect and invite you to reflect. Think about the last time you felt drained from giving too much. How can you ensure that your own cup remains full so you can continue pouring love into others without running dry? I just want you to think about that. Think about how you felt when you were drained from giving too much, and then consider how can you pour into yourself so you're better able to show up for others. Something to think about. I've talked about worth on this podcast, and it's something I talk about in conversation with people, with friends, on the internet, in groups that I'm in. And I wanted to bring up worth just to say that it is not determined by how much you give. Rather, it's the love and the intention behind the act of giving that matters. If we're going to talk about pouring from a place of abundance, from energy, I think it's important that we talk about boundaries. Like I said, we've all been there. We push past our limits to help others. We sacrifice our personal space, our peace. But what happens when our boundaries blur? When does kindness turn into self-compromise? I think it's important to notice the signs of cross boundaries and also to learn how to uphold boundaries so giving can be a joy and not a burden. There's a high cost when our boundaries are broken. Boundaries, both tangible and intangible, they shape our experiences and influence our mental and emotional well being. When I say boundaries, I'm talking about our wants, our needs, and our expectations. Have you ever felt that pang of unease when you've agreed to something you didn't really want to do? Or perhaps you let someone into your personal space, whether mentally or physically, and later regretted it. That pang of unease, that feeling of regret, they're symptoms of boundaries being overlooked. Now, I'm sure some of you might be thinking as you listen to this, I don't want to come off as selfish or unkind. I want to be there for the people I care about. And I get it. I really do. But here's a reframe. Boundaries aren't barriers, they're safeguards. I'm going to go ahead and say that one again. Boundaries aren't barriers, they're safeguards. They don't have to shut people out, they can be used to protect what's within. Our energy, our peace, and our well being are vulnerable when exposed without caution. When our boundaries are broken, it can lead to feelings of resentment, frustration, exhaustion, and that impacts our relationships with others and ourselves. We might start questioning our self worth, our ability to stand up for ourselves. And before we know it, we're spiraling down a rabbit hole of self doubt. So, how can we set boundaries without feeling guilty? You want to show up for people, you want to help them out, you want to be of service. But to do that, I think it's important to have some parameters around that. There's 4 things that we can do to set some boundaries without feeling guilty. The first thing is start by understanding your limits. Recognize what feels comfortable and what doesn't. It's okay to trust your instincts. Trust your intuition. You know what's best for you. For this, I would say tune into your body. If you're considering doing something to help somebody else out, to show up for them in some kind of way, think about doing that. Maybe even envision it, what showing up for them looks like, and feel how that is in your body. If you pay attention to how it feels in your body, you'll be able to understand if that feels right or if it doesn't feel right for you. The second thing is to communicate clearly. It's not about saying no. It's not about saying no aggressively. It's not about explaining yourself or over explaining yourself. It's about saying yes or saying no, and also including your expectations or your abilities to contribute. Maybe that looks like your friend asks if you could volunteer to help out this organization she's involved with for 3 Saturdays. The first and the third Saturday, you're not available. The second Saturday, you can do. Instead of being stressed out and avoiding the situation, and I don't want to say no, and how do I tell her that I can't do that? Clearly communicating is as simple as saying, I can be there for you on that second Saturday, but the first and the third, I've already got stuff going on. You don't have to say what it is if you don't want to. You don't have to justify yourself. You don't have to move your life around. It's just, this is what I can do. This is how I can show up. Small example, but I think it's important. The third thing we can do to set boundaries without feeling guilty is to prioritize self-care. And self-care, kind of like pouring out of an empty cup, has become one of those sayings that's somewhat to moderately irritating. But self-care is important. And it's not just about your physical well-being. Your mental and emotional self-care is crucial as well. When you prioritize your own needs it becomes easier to recognize when a boundary is needed. If you're taking care of yourself, you'll recognize when you're slipping, when you're not doing the things for yourself that you need to show up in the best way that you can. Again, can't pour from an empty cup, right? So if you prioritize taking care of yourself, re energizing yourself, then you can show up for others. The fourth thing is to remember that you can reassess and adjust your boundaries. Life is dynamic, right? Our boundaries, they might change. If you regularly check in with yourself to ensure that your boundaries align with your current circumstances and feelings, you're going to feel a lot better about the boundaries that you have in place. I think it's important to really understand the cost of broken boundaries can lead to a diminished sense of self, strained relationships, drained energy, and that's tough. That's tough to deal with. But with awareness and intention, we can set boundaries that honor our well being and nurture our relationships. Remember, it's not about shutting the world out, but inviting the right energies in. In talking about giving, possibly overextending, needing some boundaries, looking at your boundaries, I want to get into the idea of meaningful giving. So, when you're giving, it's about aligning that with your values, understanding your limits, and finding joy in the act itself. True generosity should uplift and rejuvenate us, not leave us feeling depleted. We can give in ways that honor ourselves, ensuring that our acts of kindness are enriching and not exhausting. As we've navigated the waters of giving, receiving, and setting boundaries, which kind of reminds me of the Joey Tribbiani scene from Friends where he's talking about his officiant speech for Monica and Chandler's wedding. I think he's like, oh, it's a love based on giving and receiving, as well as having and sharing. A love that they can give and have is shared and received. Anyways, I don't know. Like Golden Girls, also love Friends. And as I'm saying that, that just kind of popped into my mind. So back to the point, let's consider how we find the balance between being generous and preserving our own energy. Like so much in life, it's a delicate dance. And we can reclaim our energy even as we continue to give. I want to address a core belief: generosity doesn't equate to depletion. Again, true generosity should leave you feeling full, not empty. It's not about how much you give, but the intention and energy behind that giving. I think this goes back to the idea of you're giving from a place where you feel like you can and you want to, rather than feeling obligated or like you have to. And generosity, when I talk about that, it can come in various forms. Maybe it's your time, your knowledge, your love, your resources. It can include a lot of things. And it's not about the quantity, but the quality of connection and impact made. If you're giving and you're showing up for the people in your life, you're there when they ask you to be, whether it's with your time, your knowledge, your love, your resources, something else. If you feel like you're starting to be stretched a little too thin, you can reclaim your energy and generosity. And I want to give you some strategies for that. The first one, be intentional. Understand why you're giving. This goes back to the idea of energy. Is it out of obligation, or does it align with your core values and desires, with your priorities? You want to give with purpose, not with pressure. Again, it should come from a place that aligns with your values, your desires, what you can do, rather than out of a sense of obligation. The second thing to reclaim your energy and generosity is to celebrate your generosity. Instead of focusing on what you've lost, maybe you look back and you're like, man, I really needed that Saturday to get some stuff together. Rather than kind of dwelling on the time, the energy, the resources, whatever it might be that you lost in that act of giving, focus on the positive impact of your giving. It could be a smile that you brought to someone's face, the relief that you provided, shouldering some of that burden for a friend, the difference you made in a community, whatever it might be. And this isn't about patting yourself on the back because you did something nice for somebody else. This is about taking a minute to feel good. It's good to feel good. And it's okay to feel good about yourself because you're generous towards somebody else. You can celebrate that, however that might look for you. You don't have to scream it from the rooftops, post it all over the internet. Look at me, I'm so great. But you can take a moment to celebrate yourself and the kindness and generosity that you bring into the world, that you bring into the relationships with the people that matter to you. The third thing to reclaim your energy and generosity is to rest and recharge. Just like you'd recharge a battery, right? You plug in your phone after using it. You got to recharge yourself. It could mean taking a nap, meditating, taking time for a hobby, reading a book, having a quiet moment with a cup of tea, cup of coffee, maybe some type of movement, a walk in nature, outside along the beach, through a forest, whatever you got near you, through the desert. I don't know. It might mean playing, just doing something for you for the sake of doing it. The fourth thing, again, set clear expectations. It's kind of back to that boundary piece. If you're sharing your time, your expertise, just let other people know the limits of that. This way, they can respect your boundaries and you can give without feeling overstretched. You know what you're getting into when you go into it. There's not that worry, that anxiety that surrounds it. There's not that feeling of regret later that you did too much or you didn't explain what you could or couldn't do. If you set those expectations up front, really you're preserving your energy. And the fifth thing is practicing gratitude. Just remind yourself of the good things in your life. This simple practice can shift your focus from depletion to abundance. Sometimes we get caught up in what we don't have or what's bad or what's not going right. But if you take a second to write down, say 3 to 5 things that you're grateful for in your life, and when I do this, I like to do it by focusing on like really small things, like the conversation I had with the barista when I was getting my coffee, or the small chat I had with the cashier at the grocery store, stuff like that, just like the little things. When you take a moment to look at those things, it shifts your focus from the negative to the positive, from depletion to abundance. I think generosity, it's beautiful. And when it's done right, it can create a ripple effect of positivity. But as you give, ensure that you're also giving back to yourself. Because in the end, when you're nourished, when you're taken care of, you can spread far more love and positivity than when you're running on empty. So I just wanted to take a quick minute today to talk about what is your giving costing you? Something to contemplate, something to consider. And if you feel like it's costing you too much, evaluate what you're doing, how you're showing up, how you're helping people, and consider the things that you could do to nourish yourself so you can better show up for the people you love and you care about. That's it for today's episode, my friends. Thanks so much for joining me on the Live Your Truth, Love Your Life podcast. To get even more out of today's conversation, don't forget to swing by the show notes and download your freebie. Want to keep the conversation going? I'd love to hear what spoke to you most today. Head on over to my Instagram at Live Your Truth, Love Your Life and drop me a comment. I'm always excited to connect and learn more about you. Remember, the journey towards living your truth and loving your life is a rewarding one. New episodes are dropping each Monday and Thursday, and I can't wait for next time. Until then, have a fantastic week.